Oh, I started speaking before I turned on my mic. Do that all the time. My kids are like, I see your face and I see that you're talking, but I can't hear you. So anyway, welcome all to the virtual instrumental rehearsal. So if you did not do so already, make sure you have the music. You don't need it printed out. You can have it downloaded. That's totally fine. If you were my students, I would definitely want you to have a physical copy, but alas, this is just temporary. So um, we are going to basically go through my rehearsal process today. And so okay, let me go back to my slides. All right, if I can get it to work. Here we go. So today, well, before we get to the introduction or to the agenda, I have seen a bunch of you already in previous sessions, but if you have not taken a session yet this week, welcome. My name is Michelle Rose, and I am a full-time online music teacher. This is my 4th year doing that. So I was doing that before COVID hit. I teach middle and high school general music, and then I also direct the extracurricular virtual band / orchestra and choir guest teacher elementary. And so this whole week has been a celebration of the launch of my book, Teaching Music Online, a comprehensive guide for K-12 music educators. And so if you'd like to connect with me, I am at the musical _ rose on Instagram. That's my main social media platform. Or you can email me at michelle@themusicalrose.com, although I will get to your email, but I'm very behind on email right now, so it might be just a little while. Okay, so today, first I'm going to show you essentially how I prep for my rehearsals, and then we will actually participate, or you will participate in a rehearsal, so you can kind of see what it's like to be a student on the other side of this. And I am going to do this within the context of the music that we're using today, but that is not a piece that I am playing. It's just something that was available to download on the internet for free. Just to give you some context for my virtual instrumental ensemble, it's open to all students in grades 6 through 12. It is extracurricular, so my students are not graded for this. They come to rehearsal, they complete assignments, they do everything without grades attached. So it is definitely possible. We are pretty limited in rehearsal time, so I only have 2 30-minute rehearsals with them per week. So they do need to spend a decent amount of time outside of class practicing. And so my instrumental ensemble this year, we just kind of wrapped up the new members introduction. And so I'm going to have band and orchestra instruments. I'm going to have viola for the first time, which is pretty exciting. I will also have guitar, bass guitar, and keyboard. And then there's a kid that really wanted to do electronic beats. And so I was like, sure, come on, we'll find a way to fit you in. So basically, my ensemble is very eclectic, but I really wanted to create an instrumental ensemble because that was so important to me, growing up in middle school and high school. And so I wanted to make sure my students had that same community and an opportunity, of course, to play music. So because our instrumentation is so eclectic, I do play mostly flex arrangements. And so it's typically like 4 or 5 parts. And then instead of each, individual kind of instrument getting a part, it's broken down a little bit more simply. And so if you've never done flex arrangements, I highly recommend them, especially during COVID. And if you are, teaching online, or you think you will be teaching online for a little bit longer than what a couple weeks, I highly recommend flex arrangements because it just simplifies your life a little bit and it makes things a little bit easier for students as well, since there aren't so many different parts to keep track of. And you can kind of group students and do sectionals a little bit easier as well. If you are looking for some higher level flex arrangements, I really like Ian Detterling arrangements. So, flex arrangements for the most part tend to be, on the easier side, maybe grade 1.5 to 2.5. But if you're looking for something 3, 4, or 5, they do exist out there too. So flex arrangements are not just for, beginner, smaller ensembles. There are flex arrangements for all levels. A requirement is that they must have some prior experience. So I do not have a beginning band or orchestra program. I would love to do that, but I am the only music teacher K-12 at my school. So I have a very limited amount of time. And so I do an audition, but I say audition very lightly. I take pretty much every kid as long as they show up with their instrument and they at least attempt to play 16 measures of something and 2 scales. So if they can do that, I can definitely work with them. We do have smart music at my school, which does make things a little bit easier, especially in terms of practice. So I just wanted to kind of give you the whole picture of what I'm dealing with. It's definitely not an ideal situation, but I still make it work. My kids still enjoy being in virtual ensemble, and we are still able to have a performance at the end of the semester. I do not do video performances, so I only do audio, and that is because one, I value my time, and so I don't have the expertise to put together a beautiful video, kind of Eric Whitaker style video, and I don't really have the funds to pay someone, and I don't have the time to figure it out myself. And quite honestly, my students, they really light up when they hear all their parts together. Not one student has ever said to me, "You have ruined this experience because I cannot see my face or my friends' faces in the end product." So what really excites them is that they can hear their part being part of a whole group, and hearing that rather than, seeing it. So I would just say if you're feeling pressured to do a video, just audio only is just perfectly fine. Also, in terms of licensing, a little bit easier too. So, all right, just had to throw that out there because I feel like I see that debate going on pretty often. This is the other thing that I see happening pretty often is directors saying, do your kids actually like being part of virtual ensemble? Or my kids really hate playing online. They really hate being part of this online ensemble. How do you make them? So yes, my students actually not only, do they come to rehearsal, but they actually like being part of virtual ensemble. And so how do I know that? This is from a survey. These are all of my students saying these words. So if you can't take it from me, take it from kids. I did not prompt them. All I said was, what did you like about virtual ensemble this semester? And so you can see that while there is some playing in there, the community part is also really important. And I think during these times, it's kind of easy to forget about that part because that is, we're just trying to survive. We're just trying to get content out there. But your kids can love virtual ensemble, virtual instrumental ensemble. Make it about not only the music, but about all of us kind of coming together in a space, especially in times that are so turbulent. So ways I like to facilitate community, we do virtual lunch bunch. So students, instead of, they can't just come to my band room and, eat lunch together or whatever, but they can all come into my virtual classroom, eat lunch, kind of chat, talk about the tough math tests or, NWEA testing that my whole school takes at the same time. But, it's kind of that typical, I'm in the band room and I'm hanging out experience, which is it warms my heart a little bit too, and I get a lot of laughs. You can also do like short little things like bring your pet to rehearsal day, one of my favorites, where kids just, for a minute in the beginning of rehearsal, they just show what kind of pets they have on their screen. And even though it's, kind of silly and maybe not exactly related to music, there's something about everyone just kind of holding up their cute dog or, cat or showing a shot of their fish all together at once that really makes you feel like a weird little community. And it also kind of just starts off rehearsal on a high note, pun fully intended. Okay, so here is how I prep for rehearsal. And so this is this is kind of looking at this for the first time. So what I will do is I have my score here. And so I will go ahead and just kind of look at it, glance over, and kind of think to myself, okay, what are students pretty likely to struggle with? And so this is before I even hear them. And so I just kind of pick a few things, outline a few things. That's what I did for rehearsal today, although I know you all could probably sight read this, pretty well. I'm thinking of you as my 6th through 12th graders, and what would they struggle with or be challenged by? After that first rehearsal, I listened to student recordings. So students are assigned in Smart Music a set of measures each week. If you don't have Smart Music, that's totally fine. You can use Flipgrid, which is completely free. You just need to make sure that you teach your students how to play with a metronome every single time. But you need to be listening to your students kind of every week in some way. Does that mean that I listen to every single student's recording every single week, especially if they have more than one assignment? No. Generally, I can listen to, a couple of kids who have the same part, and generally they are making kind of similar mistakes. Kids are pretty predictable. Musicians are pretty predictable. We know what parts are going to be tough, and every once in a while, kids will struggle with something that I didn't quite catch. But for the most part, I know, and then I listen, and then I'll make notes in my score, and that's what we'll rehearse silently the next week. Oh no, Flipgrid may not be on a lot of school districts. Do not use policy. So, so if your school doesn't have Flipgrid, Smart Music, you could have them. So if they have a computer, you can have them download Audacity and show them how to export and upload to a file. It's just the more clicks that people have or students have to do, the less likely it is to get turned in. I think there is something that you can also integrate into Google Classroom. I do not have Google Classroom, but I'm sure there's something, some sort of something that you can integrate into there too. So there's something out there. Students just need a way to record. And so but if you are in that situation, I can definitely brainstorm with you. I'm already thinking. Band Lab for Education. Yes. Thank you, Christine. Yes, because that is free as well. I think it's tough though when there are very strict policies in place. It kind of depends. So, all right. I do put these recordings together that I get from students every 2 or so weeks via GarageBand. And so I do not spend a ton of time doing this. I do have a video of my process on my YouTube channel of a PD that I did a couple months ago. But basically what I do is I download all the parts, I create a metronome track, and I kind of just line up the beginning. And so it's okay if students' parts don't all line up. In fact, I love it when that happens. And it's not just because I'm messing with it, but truly if students start together, but then they start in different parts getting off, that is something that we can talk about in rehearsal, and the importance of precision in our rhythms and all of that. So I can do this in under an hour now. And now that Smart Music just added a feature this summer where you can download a student part very easily, it will probably take me less time. But that is essentially what I do in a nutshell. And so I'm not spending tons and tons and tons of time on my rehearsal prep. The biggest thing is just making sure that students are submitting each week. And so I do send out lots and lots of reminders, but also, we talked about this yesterday at our first meeting, what is going to make us successful this year? And students talked about, we need to practice, we need to submit parts, we need to all contribute, because everyone has to kind of play a part in this, and we're not in person, so students have to be accountable to each other. And for them to come up with that, not me, was a lot more powerful. And so I highly recommend, if you haven't asked your students yet, kind of as a group brainstorm, like, okay, so what do we need to do this semester to be successful? What is going to prevent us from doing that? How do we prevent those things, like not practicing or showing up late to rehearsal or that kind of thing? So now let's do something. So go ahead and take out your part. If you don't have your part, it can be found at bit.ly/march with an E, because we're playing March Militaire music. And then I want you, you don't have to look at every single part, just your part. I want you to tell me, what is one thing that you think a student would find challenging or might need extra time rehearsing? And so this is also something you can use with your students. I always use a timer. And so I'm gonna put a minute on there, find something, and then put it in the chat when you do. What do you think from your part a student might find challenging or might need extra time rehearsing? Again, putting it in the chat once you find something. Awesome. All right, and so the reason why I do use timers is because wait time is really difficult to give in person, and then it's extra painful when you are just standing silently in your office waiting for students to give an answer, right? Sorry. This is not my calm timer, that is my intense timer. Okay, so lots of you have already picked out a lot of different, things that students will likely need help on. And so why do I have you do this? Because I want you to trust yourself. Trust your musicianship. You don't need to hear every single thing for you to know what your students are going to need help on. That's not to say that you should never listen to them, but it is to say that you don't need to hear them 100% of the time to be able to help them. And so, yes, and for whoever said that the strings, the key, my strings players get very, very good at playing in band keys because a lot of the flex arrangements are in the flat keys or the band keys. But I tell them it's just going to make you a better, more awesome musician. They don't ever write flex arrangements in orchestra keys. I know. I tell them, oh, the world is so unfair sometimes, and yet we are going to make it. All right, so now let's take a look at what an actual rehearsal will look like. So this is an example of an agenda that I would show my students. And so I typically have them log into Smart Music in the beginning of rehearsal, even if we don't use it. I like for it to be open. And also then if it's open and we end rehearsal and I say, your Smart Music is open, why don't you just go ahead and practice right now? Your instrument is out. It really does help facilitate, students actually getting into Smart Music and playing things. So that is why people are like, why don't you just do this all asynchronously? Students could learn their individual parts on their own or whatever. And the thing is, having a rehearsal really helps with accountability in terms of learning music. Even just the fact that they got their instrument out to play in rehearsal is a big step. It's step number one. So I would tell them, okay, log into Smart Music, open the music. You don't, need to do anything with it yet. I don't have my students read from the screen, so I found from doing this, this is our third year in virtual ensemble, that it is just easier to mail parts to students. Because even if you have printer permissions or whatever, not all students have a printer. Printers tend to break when you need them to work. Just a million things happen, so it's just easier to kind of mail things out. Now, we don't have a school, like a central location, so I'm sending it out in the sense that I'm probably not going to get it back. And I don't really have a good collection system or a good system at all. This is only the third year we have existed, and I'm still figuring out a lot of things. But, that is just what my situation is. Probably you can just have your students bring it back to school when that is a possibility. So first we're gonna do a just for fun activity. And so this is going to be speed get to know you. So if you came to the choir rehearsal, we did something kind of similar. But I think it is really important for your students to be able to like laugh and talk to each other for, even just a minute or two, because they're kind of missing out on those moments in band where, or orchestra where the director says something and your kids have like made a meme about it and they all kind of laugh because that's what happens. Or something silly happens in the low brass and the woodwinds are kind of blaring back there and everyone's kind of laughing a little bit. Like those kind of moments don't always happen quite as organically. So you want to make sure that you're still doing fun things with your kids. So this is Speed Get to Know You. And what it is a very quick virtual icebreaker, because icebreakers that take more than 2 minutes when you're just in a room with someone, it feels awkward. So we do speed to get to know you, and I tell my kids, if you hate icebreakers, it'll be over really soon, but you'll still have a little bit of fun, I promise. Okay, so this is would you rather, and I know everyone would have an opinion about this, even though it's essentially the same thing. So would you rather play a piece that's in six flats or six sharps? And so I'm going to put you in a breakout room with one other person. So when you get in there, you're going to say your name, where you're joining from, and then your answer. So would you rather play music six flats or six sharps? You will only have 1 minute to do so. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I'm going to do this correctly. So if you're in Zoom, it's not the groups, it's the rooms, because on Monday I accidentally assigned people to just two rooms and there were like 17 people in one room. So all right, so I'm dividing you up, and you can use chat or you can use mic, it's up to you. So I also add a timer where it will close after 1 minute automatically, so you don't have to monitor that. So here it is. I'm gonna open up the rooms in 3, 2, 1. If you're watching this recording, everyone is in their breakout rooms, hopefully having lots of fun, maybe not. Any more seconds? All right, welcome back. So that was, again, just speed get to know you. So I know people have lots of strong feelings and opinions. Okay, I have one more. So these are nice and quick. Can take you just 2 minutes in the beginning of class. So here is your second one. All right. Now, we've all had some sort of experience with an outdoor performance or gig. So would you rather perform outside in 100-degree humid heat or 35 degrees and windy? And this is in Fahrenheit. So 100 degrees in hot humid heat or 35 degrees and windy. I grew up in New Jersey, so I have a lot of strong feelings about the cold weather. So, all right, going to put you in breakout rooms this time. You will have a new partner. So I just recreate the breakout rooms. All right, you are going to be put in your breakout room in 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. So that was Speed Would You Rather. And again, just something fun for your students to kind of do to get to know each other, to create community. And if you don't like icebreakers, if you don't, they're over in just 2 minutes. Okay, you don't need to do this every time, but it's something maybe on a Friday to do or something like that. Okay, so going back to our agenda, so we are going to do a quick warm up. So we will go into actual playing now. And so we will do a quick physical warm up. We'll do a little bit of breathing. Yes, I do have my orchestral instruments. Just do breathing along with us because it's usually pretty quick. And there's nothing wrong with having good, nice, deep breathing technique. Even if you're playing a string instrument. Then we will do warm-ups, and then we'll get into playing a little bit. So you do not need to pick your instrument up yet. In fact, go ahead and place it down gently. And so I tell my students, you can go ahead and put me in speaker view so you can see me more easily, and that way I'm not so tiny on their screen. And so I usually do a physical warm-up with them because a lot of my students are kind of hunched over all day and they're kind of tight. And so it just kind of helps to make sure that they're not playing, so much like this. So let's go ahead and do that. And I know me getting through this week definitely needs to release some tension. So go ahead and roll your shoulders back and in the opposite direction. And go ahead and roll your head in one direction. And in the opposite direction. And then go ahead and stretch up and reach over. And to the other side. And then reach up and a nice big sigh out as you let your hands go. And shake out your hands just a little bit. And then go ahead and reach your shoulders up, put lots of tension in them, and let them go. Go ahead and put your shoulders up, lots of tension, let them go. One last time, lots of tension, and this time push your shoulders back and down. Oh, look at that beautiful posture that you suddenly have. All right, so now what I want you to do is go ahead and take your hand like this. We're gonna do a breathing exercise. I want you to blow on your hand like you're fogging up a mirror. Okay, so feel that air, it's pretty warm, right? You could draw a little smiley face in your hand if it was glass. Now I want you to pick a spot on your hand, somewhere in your palm right here, and I want you to go ahead and blow directly there. So take a deep breath in and then try that. Okay, so that air is nice and cool. So cool air is what we want. And yes, my string players are like, what, cold air? What is this? Just say, come along with us, come along with us. This is what we got to do when we have all these different instruments all together. So now you are going to use your cool air and you are going to breathe deep. You're going to use deep belly breaths. And so what you're going to do is breathe in for 2 and then breathe out for 8. And thinking about that cool air here. And so what I want you to do is make sure that you get all the air out in 8 counts. So if you are getting all of your air out in 8 counts, what count should you have half your air out? Either put your answer on your fingers if your camera's on, or put the answer in the chat if your camera's off. So what count do we need to have about half our air out? Awesome. Okay, great. You can go ahead and put your hands down. So you can see right there that I do not necessarily need to have every single kid's camera on. There are ways to engage kids who maybe can't turn their cameras on, whose cameras were broken. I had a violin player last year who would try as she might, she would put on her camera and then it would turn weird colors like horizontal stripes and then it would just stop working. So a lot of times these things were out of their control. However, you can still engage kids to let them, or for them to let you know that they're still here. All right, so in for 2, out for 8, in for 2, out for 12, in for 2, out for 16. If we were doing this regularly, I would have you, tell me halfway for all of them. But we're gonna go on for time's sake. Now, I use a metronome to do this because it is just a little bit easier than me snapping two. So again, we'll do in two, and then we'll go out for eight, into, etc., etc. So here we go. 1, 2, ready, and in two, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the air out, in two, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here comes 12, in two, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, halfway, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In, two, out, two. Okay, so we get the idea, right? So we're gonna move on for time's sake. But this is a good way to kind of get my kids thinking about breathing, or my string players to kind of feel a little strange, but feel awesome at the same time, because we all look silly together. That's what I tell my band and choir kids. I said, your family is gonna be peeking around the corner being like, what are they doing? They're breathing into their hand, and we all look silly together. It's all okay, I promise. Because it is a little bit awkward at first to be in your house doing these very strange band and orchestra and choir warm-ups. So if you can mention to students, like, we are all going to be looking a little bit silly together, I find that my students kind of laugh a little bit and say, okay, even if my family doesn't quite understand, you know, we as this community can do this together. All right, now go ahead and take out your warm-up. And so your warm-up is very sneaky. Why is it sneaky? Because for the string players, it is different from the band players. And so I want my band players to warm up on B flat long tones. However, that is not really going to necessarily help my string players. My string players are going to warm up on open strings for that exercise number 1. So the really cool thing is, with online learning, you can give your students different warm-ups if you would like, as long as they're the same amount of measures. And so it can be highly customized because they are not all playing together. So people can be playing vastly different things. If you have, you know, some really high achievers or some kids who need some extra help, you can give them a different warm-up in this situation. So there are some positives to this. And so I just realized I was not sharing my computer sound for the metronome. I think it hopefully was still coming through. But you do want to make sure that you do share your computer sound if you have an option in the platform that you're using. So I also use a metronome in this. I do conduct, but the metronome, again, helping, especially if students are having issues with the video kind of being choppy or glitching out, they at least will still have the audio. So let's go ahead and do this at about 75. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and do exercise number 1. Keeping in mind it's sneaky because orchestra and bands. Peeps are doing 2 different things. Here we go. Exercise number 1. 1, 2, exercise 1, 2, ready. And off. All right. So I will say the most disorienting thing about this is not being able to hear anyone. So I usually sing the part in my head, or I kind of finger along on the flute in my head. So that way I don't lose my place. It's a little bit more helpful than kind of just counting measures. But anyway, let's go ahead and go on to exercise 2. Exercise 2. So again, each exercise has something specific to the instruments, whether it's orchestra or band. So you can see it written on the page. Here we go. Exercise 2. 1, 2, exercise 2, 2, 3, off. So there will be times when you don't end quite at the same time as your students, and that is just kind of a fact of what will happen. But for the most part, I found it to be pretty effective. Okay, so then we go on and we do articulations and scales and stuff like that. And so for time's sake, we'll move on from there. But again, if you have different levels, different instruments, be creative. This is a great time because your kids can't hear each other. So go ahead and give 2 different warm-ups. All right, next. So we are pretending like we are basically starting out just from scratch with this. So I wanted to do a rhythm exercise because maybe my students aren't as familiar with these rhythms. And so here's our would you rather. So, oh, and yeah, let's do the rhythm exercise first. So here is another way that you can engage your students without, you know, and I'm gonna move my stand so this is a little easier. So what I did is I created a poll, and so say I wanted my students, you know, I didn't want just one student to be like, okay, read the rhythm. And I also didn't want to give them the rhythm, but I did want them to kind of think a little bit. So I would say, all right, so look at this rhythm. What goes here? And so this is assuming that, you know, we have done rhythm reading before. They all know the system, et cetera, et cetera. So I just launched a poll. Go ahead and put your answer up on the poll. And so again, making sure that you're still engaging your students, especially if you have students with their cameras off. Okay, great. And so then I will end the poll and I can share results out. All right, great. Most of you said and. That is and. So 1 and And then, okay, yeah, I was just second guessing myself for a second. Okay, and then for the second one, and all I'm doing is just the same poll over and over. So I am not, you know, creating a separate poll for each time. I created one poll and I'm going to use it every time. All right, so same thing. What goes in this second red box? And I have this timer down here too. It is a great thing to use as well to kind of give your students think time and a cutoff, similarly to kind of what we did in the very beginning. So I'm gonna end the poll, share results, hooray! 1. So now putting that together, we have 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2. So I'm going to put the metronome to that, and I want you to say it with me this time. Here we go. Say it with me. 1, 2, say it with me. 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2. Try it again. 2, ready, go. 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2. Okay, go ahead and pick up your instrument if you don't have it. And I want you to pick a note, a reasonable note. Do not pick something that is extremely high. And I want you to play this rhythm. Here we go. Play it on your instrument. You get to pick your favorite note, as long as it's not an extremely high note. Here we go. 1, 2, play it, go. 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2. Try it again. 2, ready, go. 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2. Okay, so that is a way that I help my students, you know, learn how to read those rhythms. And so I would do that for this rhythm and for this rhythm. And so you can see that I'm kind of hitting, you know, the basic rhythm patterns that my students might struggle with or miscount. The second activity I'm going to show you is called a 3-minute pre-read. And so here is what I have my students do. I'm going to come out of this because I need to show you on Smart Music something real quick. So every part should have an accidental somewhere, and so it is your job to find one. Don't go too far yet. So once you find that, you're going to type the measure and the accidental into the chat. So you will type out the word flat, natural, or sharp. And then, remember my students have Smart Music open. They should have Marche Militaire open. So so we're going to pretend this is Marche Militaire. I did not put it into Smart Music because I've been busy this week. But if we pretend, so this is just the B flat warm up, but if we pretend this is Marche Militaire and say this was an accidental, the neat thing is if you click on this very tiny circle to the left, you can see the fingering. So I tell my students, okay, double check the fingering. And then I want you to listen to it. So the tiny circle to the right, you can play it. And so then I will tell them, all right, go ahead and play it and make sure it matches. So that kind of helps a little bit since I can't hear whether they're playing the accidental or not. This kind of helps a little bit with that. And so then if you finish before time is up, and so it's important to always, give your students, especially early finishers, something to do. Otherwise, they will just maybe start typing in the chat or, wandering away. And so then if you finish early, try playing the whole measure on your own. Okay, so now we're going to try this. So I am going to put 3 minutes on the timer, and so you can pretend you have Smart Music there. But at least go ahead and tell me, go ahead and find your measure and type out the measure and what accidental you have. So go for it. And so it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Okay, awesome. Great, great. And so then you can pretend you have Smart Music and you are bringing it up. And so again, students, look at the note, hear it, and then early finishers go ahead and work through that whole measure. So, all right. So for time's sake, again, I'm going to stop this here. But this is another way that you can kind of get your students to do something more than just kind of playing, kind of looking and listening and all that kind of thing. So now, since we have done our rhythm exercise, we've done our little pre-read, we are actually going to go ahead and read through some of this music. So I am going to bring myself back up here. And so we will do a read through, so a sight read through Marche Militaire. And so I will say, all right, go ahead, before we even start, look at measure 22. What's happening in the end of measure 22? What's happening in the end of measure 22? And so you can either have your students type or use the mic or whatever. And so hopefully they will say, oh, there's a repeat, a repeat. So if you have your pencil, and my students are supposed to have their pencils, I would say, mark that before we even read it. Put a giant star, you don't have to mark it for now, but anything that you can anticipate, even if it's not the best, so sure, they're not really, really sight reading because we are looking at all this. But again, at the same time, you can have your students sight read small exercises elsewhere. I think just setting them up for as much success as possible when you're playing a piece is really important. Okay, here we go. So we are going to try Marche Militaire. We're going to read through it. We will take the repeats as best as possible. We are going to do it under tempo. So let's go ahead and do it. Dee, da, 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 dee, da, da. Probably do it a little bit slower with my students. Also, I don't use a baton. I think it's a little bit silly online because it's kind of thin. So here we go. All right, I know I put my hands up and the director's supposed to stop talking. I know. Here we go. From the beginning, let's read through it. 1, 2, here we go. Repeat. And so usually I might cut my students off, especially if we're taking a repeat, and say, okay, let's regroup, let's regroup. Where are you at? You know, measure 23 to 20 or 25 to 26, around that area. And so my students will either like nod their heads, or if they weren't, say, what did you miss? The repeat sign. Okay, here we go. Let's regroup and start at 26. And so it is very easy to get lost as the conductor. I mean, I sing as much as you can in your head, do your best, but you can always get your kids off and make sure they're in the right place too. Okay, here we go. 26, so that's after the second ending. Here we go, 26. 1, 2, ready, end. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and stop us there since we are at 8:50, but that at least gives you kind of an idea. And so then more things that we can talk about, of course, the dynamics, the articulations, the slurs, all of these things, you know, coming in subsequent weeks with different exercises and things like that. So now, how do I know that, for example, even though we did the rhythms, that students actually, you know, got that? And so they will submit their recordings for that week. They're due on Sunday. I will take a listen to them. If they played the rhythms fairly correctly, great. If not, I will revisit it again. So the listening part is basically just happening at a different time. It's not immediate. I have to wait a little while to be able to hear my students, but I still do. And then, you know, I do my rehearsal pretty much just like I would do it in person. Except we can't all hear each other until I put the parts completely together. So it is definitely a very strange thing at first, but like I said, if you can imagine it in your head, I promise you your students are, you know, listening and playing along, even if it's silent on your end. It can work, and even though it is super strange, my students really do enjoy playing, and they really do enjoy hearing them all together. So don't wait to the end of the semester to help your students or to put your students' parts together. I would say that's the biggest thing, is that my students, the first year I only put it together like twice because I didn't know what I was doing. But this year, or last year, I started putting it together more frequently, and students could say, oh, I am contributing to this whole group. Like, my part is important, and I'm hearing this whole ensemble together. And also, holy intonation, Batman. So, okay, yes, someone asked about intonation. So yes, I do have them tune on their own. So at the end of the warm up, or in Smart Music, there is a tuner, so that I can just have them, you know, tune like that. What I do too is that warm up that I gave you all, I put it into Smart Music and I assign it at the end of the term, and then I put do not submit. And so I just tell students, okay, before you start playing your part, please go ahead and play this through this warm-up at least once. So that way I know that they are playing the warm-up, and also so they're not like overwhelmed with, you know, 5 different things that they have to do differently each day. So yeah, I would say, you know, definitely have them use a tuner or a tuner app or something like that. If you're using Smart Music, it is built in. Do you ever play a drone for playing pitch? So I haven't, partially because I have, you know, all different like band and orchestra instruments. I guess I could technically do that. So perhaps I will try that, but it's definitely not a bad idea. I think because I have just 2 30-minute rehearsals per week, some of the things that I do are more limited than what I would do kind of in person. Do I ever play piano with them to help them keep them on track? No, honestly. So my husband is a piano player and he is fantastic and amazing. My piano skills, on the other hand, are kind of more limited. So if you can do that, I remember my band director in high school did that with us, and my mind like is always blown. But I also thought that every band director did that ever. I was like, how can I ever do that? So what I do on occasion though is if there is a high quality recording, I will play that and have them kind of play along with that. Smart music again can also be helpful for that. If the piece is already in smart music, there's some sort of high quality recording that often goes along with it. So I would say that, students should still be listening to exemplars of, whatever instrument they play. So that way they know what tone they're aiming for, especially because they're not playing all together as often. Good questions, though. I am going to open up for questions in just a moment. Before I do, though, I am just going to put it out there that if you do want more tips like this, my book, Teaching Music Online, A Comprehensive Guide for K-12 Music Educators, is available through FLAT Books. And so if you are interested in that, I will put the link in the chat. I have tons of tips, tricks, templates, demonstrations, elementary, middle, high school, general music, performance ensembles, even a little music theory. So the link is in the chat for that. And then also, don't forget to enter the Teaching Online Essentials giveaway. So I am giving away a couple of my favorite things to celebrate my book launch. And so tonight I used my standing desk, so that's how I'm kind of more at the appropriate height. I have my second monitor over here where I have the metronome pulled up. I can see you all, the chat, the polls, and all of that. So it is very, very helpful to have that second monitor. My blue light glasses, could not live without them. And a couple of other things too. So you get 8 bonus entries for attending today if you put in the code making music in all caps in the one section that says PD or whatever, or attended PD. So that is the secret code for today. So definitely take advantage of that. And now, if you have questions, you are welcome to ask them now. If something strikes you in the middle of the night, feel free to come to open office hours tomorrow or ask me anything. Especially if you want to ask me something really specific about your program, I can definitely try to brainstorm with you. I don't have every single answer, but I can at least send you in the right direction. So if you have questions, I will stick around. But if not, that is all that I have for you today. Thanks for coming and making music with me. Do I teach with headphones on? It kind of depends. Usually I do, but I will say I kind of do it half and half. So I prefer to teach without the headphone, but if there's something kind of loud happening, or my students have said sometimes like they can't understand. It's mostly on my work laptop. This laptop is usually pretty fine. So yeah, I would say ideally, though, it is a little bit easier, especially because you can walk around too. So if you move and you don't have a super high quality built-in microphone, it is super helpful. Awesome. Yes, thank you all for coming. I'm glad it was helpful. It is definitely, not ideal. My students were actually going to play together in person. Before COVID, they were going to play in April. And so it's definitely not a total replacement for playing in person. My students were still going to get together and play in person, but their event got canceled too, so it was a bummer. Have you had experience teaching beginners with this setup? Yes. So yes, I have a couple. I always have, a couple of 6th graders who usually have just played for a year, or some 7th graders who have played for a year as well. And so I just, smart music is really helpful for that. Making sure, so I do 1 or 2 one-to-one lessons with my students per semester, and they're usually just a quick 20-minute lesson. But usually I can kind of, send students in the correct direction just with those one or two one-on-one lessons. I will say, it does require students to be practicing, on their own, especially, well, I should say in my setup, because they're not taking out their instrument every day for class. With the beginner setup, I would say if you can get your kids into sectionals, that is so. I I have been dreaming up my beginner band program. I'm just waiting for a second music teacher because I have no time left. But essentially, so I have done this kind of just a little bit with my kids, and I'm going to kind of experiment with it with some of my beginners more. But if you can put them in sectionals, and set it up that way, it can be a little bit easier to give certain adjustments. You can kind of have them play, maybe one by one, but that will take ensuring that your students have this trusting environment. So definitely build that in. But I would say sectionals, I would do a sectional pretty much maybe, every kid gets a sectional one day and then full band on the last day, kind of like what I do with choir. So that would be my suggestion, is to make sure you're doing sectionals. Try to have one-on-one lessons. Doesn't need to happen all the time, but that is ideal. And then the other thing is too, is don't forget, you can always, see if the high school feeder program wants to help out your kids. So maybe, your high schoolers give a one-on-one lesson to your beginners or something like that, or college students. So everyone's attending school online. They don't have to be in a physical location. So I use my high schoolers. So I have a high school TA in my 8th grade music class. So definitely, use older kids if you have beginners, because they can, provide a lot of help. And you could set it all up in breakout rooms in whatever platform you have, just right in one session, and then kind of cycle through to just make sure things are going okay. So those are kind of my ideas. How do we leave a review for your book? Oh, thank you. So if you would like to leave a review, if you just go to the same page where you buy it, you can, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, then you can leave a review there. Okay, let's see. I think that's all the questions. So if you have anything else, please let me know. If not, have a lovely evening. And thank you all for coming.